Hello, I am Rebecca Ramos and welcome to People in Perspective. Joining me on the program today is Daniel DuVerney, a former veteran and photographer. Welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So my first is, what made you start photography?
I started photography back when I was about 16 years old. I found a camera in a phone booth. I don't know if any of you guys will remember what a phone booth is, but it was I just found this camera. There was film in it. I took it to have it developed, and the camera person gave me a roll of film, and he said, "Go ahead, take some pictures with your newfound camera." I started taking pictures, and that was the bug that hit me. And then when I went into high school, I became a high school photographer, and then I enlisted in the military, and I became an Army photographer in Germany for my 3-year tour while being as a photographer.
Okay. And could you say, you're in your childhood, with photography, was there any inspirations for doing photography?
Yeah, for me, that's a good question. Yeah, my inspiration was basically my youngest sister at the time, because I didn't know how to work with models or knew anything about fashion photography or anything like that as a 16-year-old growing on the far southeast side of Chicago. And I'm like, well, I'll just look at a magazine. So I found a magazine, and my sister dressed up, and I started taking pictures of her, and then it started from there. I started taking pictures more and more of people in my neighborhood, and that to me solidified that I think maybe I'm a photographer.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. You mentioned you did go to high school and you went to college. Was photography part of your education, and could you explain that?
Yeah. Well, in high school I was a high school photographer, but I was self-trained. I taught myself all the darkroom techniques, and which my images were actually used in a publication which is called Ebony Magazine, which was first used, one of my first photos ever used in a magazine. But I was basically self-taught in high school.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So getting off from education and stuff, I'm aware that you do own a studio in Chicago. Mm-hmm. How was that like, and what were the challenges that you faced?
Yeah. I've had my studio now for 35 years, and now that I'm retired, I still do a lot of photography, but my photography was categorized in 2 sections, mm-hmm. commercial and fashion. And the commercial part I've kind of let go a little bit to the wayside, but the mm-hmm. fashion I still work with a lot of people, especially in the corporate area and actors and models in the city. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I want to add too that I did go to college, to Ravo College of Design and Columbia College, mm-hmm. for the formal education in photography.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but were there challenges that you faced with owning the studio?
I'm sorry about that. Okay. Yeah, the challenges were, especially if you're a freelancer, it's either feast or famine. There were some months that tons of work comes in, mm-hmm. and then there were some times, especially in the winter time, that the challenge would be nobody is doing anything or wants any type of imagery and or mm-hmm. production. So that it's I would call it feast or famine, especially if you're a freelancer.
Mm-hmm. Have you seen over time, going along with the challenges, I guess, have you seen over time your studio gaining popularity at some times or not?
Yes. From beginning to where I'm at now, I have progressed. My studios have gotten bigger and bigger. I had 4 staff members working for me, and then towards the end of my career, the staff that worked with me, they shot off and had their own studios, and so now I hire freelancers if I have a big production to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then so you mentioned obviously in the studio you have a rise and fall of popularity, but you've been in the industry for a long time. What have you seen in the evolution of photography?
The obvious question for that would be digital photography, mm-hmm. from working with film and in the darkroom with chemicals to when I made that jump back in 1997 to do everything digital. And I was in the darkroom for 30 years. It was great for the time I was younger, but I was like out with the old in with the new.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, and also going along with the evolution of photography, you did mention that you were like a veteran. You did Army photography. Can you explain about that? And also, like, was the technology different when you were?
Yeah, when I was in the Army, in the U.S. Army in Germany, again, we were shooting film. It was film, so we had that technology with working with film. And my assignments during my tour of duty were basically, and I was younger, so I was able to hang out of helicopters, being strapped onto tanks, and taking images of troops in action or different manuals that we had to take photos of. And one of the big things that we had to do was, it was pretty simplistic, but it was called grip and grin, where a general would be shaking, say, like a corporal's hand, and you take a picture of that. There was a lot of that going on. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Was it ever hard for you to take pictures in such a chaotic environment, I guess?
Chaotic for me, I think, because I grew up on the far southeast of Chicago, and I was in a very small neighborhood, so I was extremely, extremely shy. And then for a young person to be thrusted into the upper echelons of the military, that was my challenge there.
Okay, and you mentioned that you work in like two areas. You work in commercial and in fashion. Could you explain the differences between the two?
Yeah, sure. Commercial photography would be like working with like taking images of glass and or food photography. That's commercial. Or furniture. I used to do a lot of that stuff. And like Sears catalog stuff would be considered commercial. And then fashion would be for anything in a magazine, for editorial with a lot of hair and makeup. And everything looks very, very glamorous, but behind the scenes, it's very technical.
So when you're doing like editorial stuff for magazines and stuff, and you're working with models, obviously, how do you get new models like comfortable with being on the camera?
Yeah, I work with seasoned models. It's very rare for me to work with somebody very new, but I used to help instruct models, and I was an instructor at a modeling school just for a short period of time because they liked my personality dealing with young people and showing them how to model and how to project for the camera.
And then going along with that, what kind of photographer are you when instructing models with both new and old?
Again, like when they're in front of the camera, I'm like a director and I guide them through the whole process, when to look, where to look, when to look at the camera, when to smile. I give them those little helpful hints. And of course, even beforehand, the rapport that we would have, the model and photographer beforehand, and working within the hair and makeup people, we try to get this, say, new person comfortable.
Okay. Well, thank you for that, but that's all the time we have today. Thank you for being on the program. It was great learning about photography. I'm Rebecca Ramos. Thank you for watching People in Perspective.